Some people say that when a community is kind of strong togetherness can be a grounds for increasing people's knowledge around in ways that increase the social someone's already had the power taken away just by there being a certain kind of information.
What do we mean when we say the end of the world? Whole world were it to end, what would it look like? Mustn't we mean the bond? Ways in which we hold on to each other. And, okay, now if I can figure this out, I can theoretically see things that people have said and answer their questions. See if things that people have said, depending on what platform you're using, if you would, if you want to chat, depending on what platform you're using. I think perhaps Twitch works a little bit better than Facebook. And apparently the YouTube didn't want to work at all, so there's that. Sorry for anybody. I guess if you went to YouTube, you're not here. So sorry for you won't hear my apology. My apologies. Not here. So anyhow, does anyone have any questions or curiosity? Anyhow, does anyone have any concerns or anything they'd like to know more about or share? Anything they'd like to know more about or share? Some people. The video behind me. Some people. Those were slide projections using it's kind of hilarious. It's an analog,
slide projections,
like an analog slide projector machine thing.
It's an analog.
It holds these these little things. There's a weird there's a bit of a time lag. So anyhow, it shows slides like the old school kind. Most of them are photos I took myself and got developed as slides just around Montreal. A handful, I was working on a project about domesticity, and so a handful of the slides are taken. I lent my camera to a few friends, and they took pictures of their respective domestic spaces. But most of them I took, and they're just photos from around. But it seemed, anyways, that project on domesticity didn't end up getting to see the light of day, or the light projector light, and so I thought it seemed kind of apt to talk about smallness and the shapes and sizes of people's lives through this process. Okay, I have a question from Julia Eiler-Smith, who is actually the curator of the exhibit. So in case if you just like stumbled upon this performance was designed as a response to well, not a response, it was an iteration of a piece that existed in the No Longer Not Yet, a group exhibition at the Leonard and Bina Ellen Art Gallery. And so Julia, who's the curator of the exhibition, asked for people who did not see the sound installation in the gallery from which this performance derives, could you describe how you've adapted the structure and talk about some of the changes and continuities this shift provided? So in the gallery space, there's a PA system that broadcasts to the whole space, and so that in the gallery, in the installation piece, that was running a drone, and then there were 4 parabolic speakers, each with a little vignette and chunks of narration playing, and so you'd get this experience of kind of walking through and hearing different moments, and the moments would kind of overlap, and you could move between them. So naturally, there's a bit of naturally, anyways, I couldn't create a spatialized performance for online because people are just logging in, and so it became more of a time-based piece, a more linear structure. So I took the drone and I used that. I also used most of the narration, although I contextualized and reordered it a little bit, and then our current context, I think, did a lot of the heavy lifting for the recontextualization. So this piece was written largely in November and December, a bit in January. So all of the words that I'm speaking, that I spoke throughout, already existed long before anybody knew that we were going to be dealing with a pandemic. Oh, there's an echo apparently. Sorry about that. I'm not sure quite where the delay is coming from, but hopefully it doesn't make me unintelligible. Does anyone else have questions? Hopefully it doesn't make me unintelligible. Does anyone else have questions? No? Okay. Oh. Hi, Andrew. Oh, there's a question on Facebook. Okay, I can't seem to see it. Just tuned in. What inspired this work? From Ashanti. Hey, Ashanti. In Ottawa. Wow. What inspired this work? Well, that's a good question. Some of the inspiration, again, this work is linked to the installation piece that was in the gallery, and so that was commissioned. So some of the inspiration obviously came from Julia Eiler Smith, who presented the theme of the exhibition. And then I was looking for ways to talk about, I guess, the end of the world, the apocalypse, in terms of its different meanings. I think a lot about how we often, obviously, the apocalypse for existing consciousnesses always seems like something that's yet to come, but we do in fact live in a world where many ways of life, many sort of entire societies and civilizations have been erased, and so in a lot of ways we're in a situation where the end of the world is something that has already happened. So you can think of, and you can think this in different kinds of ways. You can think about this in relation to slavery, obviously, the Atlantic slave trade, and how the development of early capitalism tethered to colonialism and imperialism led to a situation where entire basically Africa, even in the parts that weren't directly involved with the slave trade, Africa was destroyed. Whatever the kingdoms and nations that existed there, the ways of life of those people, their sort of futurity, the horizons of possibility for them were eradicated, and as a result, that was an apocalyptic moment for African cultures, and you can see how this underdevelopment and this like foreclosing of a future for Africans, but on both sides, both those that were traded and those that remained in Africa, played out over the course of history, and of course, continues to play out today. You've also got situations. Similar situations occurred here in North America, where the potentiality of civilizations to create their own future and to forge their own development was erased or hampered or stopped. And so in a lot of ways, I was interested in how an apocalypse can be sort of an apocalypse of ideas, or like the foreclosing of future for certain kinds of ways of life. It's not necessarily that all life dies, but that certain kinds of communication and ways of being disappear. So I guess that would be that would be how I would describe the inspiration for this piece. Oh wow, there's lots of people. Oh, some of my family, Cabo joined in. Yeah, I think that might be my uncle's family. My uncle in VK in London, and he actually performed some voice acting. So if you caught, there's little bits of Indebele mixed in there. So it's mad clipping. Is that what you're looking for? I'm not sure. Hopefully, it wasn't clipping. Too badly. Is it bizarre? Okay, so Eliza asks, is it bizarre to play over streaming, and do you plan on doing more online shows during the next few weeks? I really enjoy watching this format. Yeah, it's super weird to perform over streaming, especially the strange and elaborate way I chose to do it, because Because I'm performing behind a curtain, I was actually watching on Twitch the performance, which did contribute somewhat to some of the delay because that audio is being sort of fed twice into the system. But I was trying to work with that so it didn't get too crazy. But yeah, so performing in a context where I can't really see or can only see with a delay what is actually being presented to the audience presents its own challenges, and I found it weird. But again, I also didn't want to just sit there and like stare at my own face, so which is why I chose to do something a bit different with the projections and whatnot. I think it would be interesting to do more performances of this kind. I kept referring to this when I was talking to Julia from the gallery as a puppet show, and so maybe actually what I would want to do is some kind of stream puppet show. That could be kind of funny. Has the actual... Okay, so over on Twitch, somebody asked, has the actual T. Kiernender, I'm not sure who that is, but hello, has the actual exhibition been extended? No, I believe the exhibition has not been extended, and unfortunately, it was actually shortened. So we got it was only up for less weeks than originally intended. But I think that I mean, it was full of great work, and some of it was like specially adapted for the space. But a lot of the work is discoverable in different ways around. So there's different ways of seeing the work that was in the exhibit, and I think the other artists will hopefully display their works again. Maybe Julia, in one of the chat interfaces, could type out the names of all the other artists in the exhibition, because I'm not going to be able to recite them from memory myself. Could I talk? Okay, so somebody named CSim71 asks, could you talk about the use of drone in this piece? Is there conceptual underpinnings related to the subject questioning? So interestingly, the drone, I built the drone based off of an astrophysicist's sort of recreation of the frequency of the Big Bang. And so that's layered into the drone. I manipulated that a bit, and it actually ended up being a little too rhythmic, so it's a bit buried beneath other tones. But the idea of the Big Bang is a kind of ouroboros, and this idea of things being cyclical, the beginnings being ends and ends being beginnings. So while certain possibilities are foreclosed upon, others are opened up, which is, I guess I'm not necessarily trying to present that in a positive or negative light, that cyclicity. But yeah, so that's kind of what the drone is, because drones are sort of designed to be infinite, a suspension of time. It's both a beginning and end. The middle, there's little differentiation, and so that was the idea behind the drone. Yes, so Julia's typed out the names of the other artists in the exhibition, so I'll just so yeah, anybody can check that out. Let's see. Any other questions? It's very strange. What was the experience like watching over Twitch and Facebook and such? Do people? Well, Eliza likes this format of watching shows, but do other people like watching shows in front of their computer screen, or? Well, Eliza likes this
people like watching shows in front of their computer screen? Or, well, live's okay.
Cool. Okay. Well, maybe. Okay. Well, maybe. Kai Brooks says that it totally works format-wise, and it's cool with the visuals. Yeah, that was something I thought was kind. It's clearly video streaming is such a visual experience, and all of these platforms are actually built for, or for the most part, are built for gamers to be able to play video games, and you can watch along with them. So it seems strange that as more and more performances were moving online, those of them that I've seen hadn't really incorporated a strong visual element or tried to play with that visual aspect and the flattening and the flattening of space that way. When I perform, some of you who may have seen me perform live, I generally I play the saxophone, and I like to run around the audience, and I like to set up sound sources behind the audience and such. So it was interesting to know that it was both difficult and fun for me to have the limitation of being like, okay, you're only going to have 2 channels of audio. Also, lots of things were weirdly hard panned, so if you were listening in headphones, it might have been a dizzying experience. And you have this sort of flat visual screen that, because that isn't Videodrome, so we can't I don't know, interact in a 3-dimensional way. So the flatness seemed to. I guess I wanted to play with that, and that's the projections and the fabrics. Oh, people are still joining. Unfortunately, the fun part is maybe over, and now it's just the weird didactic part. It's also strange running your own Q&A through a computer. Some people are saying that they like watching screens, and that it's everyone's so used to watching screens already. This is the new normal. Marcus Lake says it's weird to guiltlessly check your phone. So that's totally interesting. Hi, it's very. This is the strangest part of it. Generally, after I perform, I can run away and take a shot or something. But instead, I hide in a green room. But today, you have to just come right out in front of the curtain and then field all these questions. But today, you have to just come right out in front of the curtain and then field all these questions. You can pull. So Amy McDonald pointed out that you can actually pull up the stream on a variety of different platforms at once and get a really multi-dimensional view. And interestingly, what would be interesting about that is you could probably test your. It'd be interesting to know which platforms have the most latency. You can perform without pants. Theoretically, one could perform without pants, but that's in most of the venues I perform in. That's always an option. Theoretically, one could perform without pants, but that's in most of the venues I perform in. That's always an option. It's kind of freeing. That's true. So, does any other questions? Does anyone want to know what things you heard throughout the So obviously there was the drone that was sampled from the original piece, and some other of the dialogue vignettes bits that were sampled from the other piece. But I also played the mbira through a bunch of pedals, and I played a bit of saxophone. Didn't go as hard on the saxophone as I would normally like to, but I think that my neighbors probably heard as much as they wanted to. So that's another limitation, I guess, to performing in your house, is unless you come to some sort of agreement with your neighbors, there's certain limits on how loud you can be. Or I don't know. I guess it does. I guess there's no limit on how loud you can be. There's perhaps a limit on how loud you want to be vis-a-vis your neighbors. Oh yeah, somebody, MZ Sim points out that it might have been cool to see me playing. Yeah, that's so that was something that I was playing around with, and it sort of came to depth of field, because anywhere, and that was the other thing that influenced creating this sort of setup here, is that anywhere, and that was the other thing that I don't know, I'm not an interior designer, and I like didn't have any sort of neutral space in my apartment to look at. So I wanted to create something that felt like it was designed for the show. And so in that sense, I needed to put, in order for this setup to take up most of, if not all of the screen, I had to set it quite close to the projector. And so it would have been difficult for me to be visible and perform. I had to have enough space to perform in front of the sort of backdrop. But I was perhaps considering, and maybe, if we'll see how long this goes, and if I get enthused to perform again, I was going to maybe pop out at some point and, surprise. Oh, yeah. And so Julia Eiler Smith asks, can you talk about the role of improvisation and control in this piece? Yeah, so everything I do is almost always, I don't, as some of you who've maybe played music with me before, I'm both not very good at learning tunes and remembering them, nor do I particularly enjoy it. Although I've been challenging myself through the quarantine to try and learn some traditional tunes on the mbira. So improvisation is where I feel comfortable, and so it's always any kinds of performances I do, or any kind of music I make tends to have at least some element of improvisation. And so this piece, of course, was the same. So generally what I will do is I'll draw out sort of a chronology, an arc for a set. I'll have an idea of what I want to talk about, some particular moments I'd like to hit, and then an idea of maybe how I'd like to end it. And where I'd like sort of peaks and valleys to go, but for the most part, then I collect all the materials and let it flow. And so I took a similar approach with this piece. I took the dialogue and the order it was initially in for the installation. And so that provided sort of the skeleton of the piece, and then the real backbone of it would be the drone. And then on top of that, I kind of added different elements. So I went through the slides I had, those that I took myself, and some slides that came with this projector that when Mariana got me this projector. Hi, Mariana. It had some slides in it already, and so from the 70s mostly, And so I used some of those found slides. Anyways, I curated this. I made a sort of flow for the slides that I thought matched the pacing of the dialogue, and then I kind of set up the drone, and I had everything in order, and I let things happen when they felt right. The control issue, it's really interesting. I think that obviously to respect social safe distancing requirements, this wasn't so much an option right today, but I think ideally if you were trying to do something like this, you would maybe have a separate technician and performer. That would have allowed for a few more degrees of control over like the sounds and how the delays built up and stuff like that. But I think the control comes in the planning and the preparation and sort of the assembling of the elements, and then the execution is where the improvisation comes in. If that would be sort of how the two things relate to each other in the context of this piece. That would be sort of how the two things relate to each other in the context of this piece. Oh wow, people keep just joining. It's like maybe I should do it again. I'm not going to do it again, unfortunately. But we could have done like two screenings, a 5:30 and a 6:30. Does any other comments or questions from the world, from the audience? I think that. Oh shoot! I think that Twitch and Facebook archive these things. So after I stop streaming live, it should be possible to rewatch, or if you missed the beginning, to watch the whole piece again via just like where the link to the video is. If you look at my Twitch, actually, I was doing some tests earlier, or like not earlier, earlier in the week, and I couldn't figure out even how to delete them. So it seems like this will live on in perpetuity. So it seems like this will live on in perpetuity. Yeah. All right. It seems like maybe that's all of the questions. Oh, no. Robin. So Robin Simpson also works at the Leonard and Bina Ellen Art Gallery, and was in charge of putting together the sort of programming that surrounds the exhibitions and like the public programming. And so there was a bunch of this performance was one of a whole series of performances and talks and interventions and workshops that were related to the exhibition. And there's somewhere, I think if you look in the archive, you can find a series of dispatches that Rodney Saint-Éloi wrote about the apocalypse that all sort of, it's interesting because they were, anyway. You should check it out. But to answer Robin's question, can I speak about the writing process behind the work? Certainly, I can speak about the writing process. Again, certainly, I can speak about the writing Can I speak about the writing process? That's a good question. I tend to write both slowly and quickly, I guess. Either I have something or I don't. I'm very interested in, I guess, flowing from my interest in jazz and jazz poetry and that and sound poetry and stuff. I'm interested in sort of language that is not necessarily immediately linked to language that is not necessarily no, how do I say that isn't necessarily transparent or has a sort of generic element that could allow it to be applied to a lot of situations. That's kind of always something I look for, sort of language that carries a certain kind of specificity or like enough specificity to have an emotional weight, but is also sort of vague enough that it can act as a prompt to let the whoever's bearing witness to the words, whoever's hearing them or seeing them or reading them, to fill in the blanks. And so this piece I struggled a lot with. One of my friends actually accused me of being too didactic in my work, so I was really trying to leave as much. Anyway, I was trying to leave space in the piece for the audience to reflect, and so the writing process, that was sort of where I was coming from, and I wrote in fits and spurts. Also, some of the vignettes that happened in the piece, so there's the bit that features my uncle VK, so that's a sort of imagined, overheard phone conversation, so that's why you only hear VK's voice speaking in Ndebele, and we're discussing the power going out. And so that sort of moment was meant to evoke contemporary life and how fine the line is between the wonderful lives we live in the West and sort of our entire way of life breaking down. And then the protests, I sort of wrote protest chants in relation to the text that I was working on, as well as sort of pulling stuff out of found protests. And then finally, it was the sort of discussions about power that are in the piece that were there. I wrote instructions for how to hold those conversations, but I didn't actually write the conversations. A few participants who are actually, some of them are listening, Marcus Lake, Amy McDonald, Mariana Hardy, Andy Stool, Kai Brooks, Devin Friesen, and I hope I'm not forgetting anyone. Came into my studio, and they either helped perform protests or helped had to role play as people participating in these conversations about power. In your work, you usually create an environment in which voices are hard to decipher and noise is prominent. Noise gets in the way but also serves as a support for the voices. Could you comment on the relationship of noise and decipherable language? Yeah. It's a fine line between I think that in sound art often there's a tendency toward and there's a variety of reasons for this, but there's a tendency toward very abstract electronic sounds or abstract assemblages of found sound, or really, really abstracted human speech that takes invisibilizes language completely. And that's something that I always found a little off-putting, because in many instances, not all, it gets directly in the way of the artist being able to say something concrete. And while I said earlier that I was interested in language that left a certain amount of ambiguity, there are things that I want to say, and so that's a balance. And I think that incorporating noise and varying the signal strength of clear language, of semantic content, creates a texture for the semantic content that allows people to engage with it in a variety of ways. You could take it very seriously, or you could take it as if it was background noise. And I kind of like that. I like the audio to be in a place where the semantic content to be in a place where it has that ambiguity. Is it there? Are you intended to listen very closely to it? Or is it just kind of texture? And that there's a tension there that I enjoy. And so I guess that's where I see the relationship of noise and indecipherable language. I also think that noise and pure sound obviously can communicate things, can express things, can fill in gaps in certain ways that language can't quite get to, and so that there's like, although this didn't happen, but if I like wail really hard on the saxophone, that's a very clear indication often. That's often used to express anger in my pieces, and so that's a way of sort of saying something concrete through the contextualization of it. So the other voices, I'm thinking of a piece that I have been doing recently about police, algorithmic policing and predictive policing. And so there's sort of this frame narrative where a narrator discusses a relationship to these predictive policing models and how they've affected their community. And then this is all over top of sort of a police scanner that I took. It wasn't actually a police scanner, because by the time I was making this piece, all the police scanners had gone encrypted, so you can't actually listen to them anymore. But in the US, there are still a few sort of public security helplines that the police and other medical and fire services use. And so I sampled one of those streams, so that's kind of creates a background noise. And all of that creates a context in which, so the narration that's very clear, and then this background noise of police scanner, which is a sound that people can kind of possibly recognize that it's some sort of service radio. So that creates a context in which the expression of anger through the saxophone is that much clearer. And so I think that there's different ways that noise and the decipherability and indecipherability of language can benefit meaning, can help each other work together to create meaning or specific meanings. So I guess that's how I would answer that question. And yeah, I guess, I mean, related to the use of the police scanner there, and sort of less to the, maybe kind of related to this piece, by using words, you're very explicitly creating something that's human, or sentient, conscious, and so there's a sense there too where it'll, even if the language itself isn't super clear, different ways and patterns of people talking, you can understand a lot about what's going on by how the language is presented. All right. Any other questions? I'll look over on the... just more people keep joining in. That's funny. Hi, all of you people who've joined latterly. The performance is over, but you can watch from the beginning once the stream is done, and then you can hear all the stuff. And I guess this video will just stay up on my Facebook and up somewhere on, I'm not 100% sure how Twitch works, but if people have more questions, if they go back and watch it and then have questions, then you can maybe leave them as comments and I can check those out. I'll get to them when I get to them. Yeah. I'm not sure that I guess I might say that yeah, I'm not sure I have anything else I necessarily wanted to say. Figure out ways in which you can help the people around you. Check in on your neighbors. See if you have elderly neighbors. Maybe offer to fetch some groceries for them or something. There's, I think, a lot of the services for unhoused people are needing help. I know Resilience Montreal is accepting volunteers or even direct donations of food. So that's something to consider. There's lots of mutual aid funds for all of the folks who've I mean, so many industries are gutted by this not allowed to be more than 2 people in one place rule, clearly. So check out, and if you're fortunate enough to still be earning a wage, feel free to give to those, or be encouraged to give to those. A lot of people aren't going to be able to access whatever government funds for a variety of reasons. These bureaucracies aren't necessarily designed to be flexible or compassionate, so certainly there's going to be people who are falling through the cracks, and hopefully those funds can ensure that they don't fall completely by the wayside. I guess that's what. Oh, so Julia over on Twitch says, I'm relaying a maybe last question? Question mark? Do you have any thoughts about audience and listening in common, which this seems, especially in the current context, a manifestation of that? I have lots of thoughts about audience. And this is sort of my first experiment performing live through streaming. This is sort of my first and I don't know how I feel about it exactly. It's again the way I had this set up. I was sort of doubly removed from the audience because I was the audience was interacting. I had a 2-computer setup. I was running a sound card and a bunch of effects on a computer behind the screen and some mics in there. And then I had another computer here that was taking that sound from my stereo system and directly from this mic. So I had a situation where I couldn't tell exactly what the audience was seeing, and I couldn't hear exactly what they were hearing. Obviously, those things could be fine-tuned if I had the right cables and stuff. So this felt very removed from audience for me, and I couldn't even really see like the chat going off. So, which is how I like it in some sense. Generally, I don't. I kind of. I don't know. I don't want to. There's all sorts of weird words. Like it's not like I could go into a flow state, or I like go into a trance or something, or like block everything out. But generally, when I perform, it's like not, unless I'm performing something in an ensemble, and then it's completely engaged with the other performers. It's not necessarily super reactive to the audience. A lot of the performances I do are intentionally antagonistic to audiences, which is something that's sort of difficult to do. And I guess over streaming, because the electronic mediation is already so alienating, that further antagonizing the audience might just, completely ruin any kind of engagement. And also these platforms, Twitch and YouTube Live and Facebook Live, are developed with certain kinds of users in mind, and generally designed to carry positive affect. And, there's a jokey, casual kind of norm to streamer sort of patter and streamer conversation, and I think that generally what's being sought is some kind of organic connection, a casualness, an informality that communicates some kind of empathy, that builds a sort of almost personal relationship between the audience and the performer. And generally that's not necessarily a key part of how I see of skin tone or how my performances often go. And also maybe something that's kind of difficult to deal with. But also there's a latency. I don't know. I think this is that I guess streaming and presenting work, especially primarily audio work, as a live performance, including video over a stream, really creates a very different relationship to audience and different relationship to listening, because on some levels, on many levels actually, there's and this is always true to some extent, but I think what the listener, what the audience member experiences and what the performer experiences, or even the iteration, like the sort of simulacrum of what the audience is experiencing that the performer can access, is like very different from what is going on. Like I just think that the experience of performer and audience in this context is just like wildly different, and so I think I don't know. I think that creates an interesting tension, but also is something that I'm not sure I know 100% how best to navigate. Yeah. I hope that kind of answers that question. Okay. Seems to be about 7 p.m. People keep joining. Oh my god. I think perhaps I will sign off now, unless there's did I miss any questions? Once again, thank you to the Leonard and Bina Ellen Art Gallery, Julia Eiler Smith, for putting this all together, and the rest of the team there, Robin Simpson and Michelle and Hugues, and Larissa works there too. There's a bunch of people work there. Thank you to all of them for putting this on. Thank you to everybody who tuned in. And if you signed in later or late, or well, there's no time. This is a sort of asynchronous. You can actually weirdly go back and watch from the beginning, and then you can have given that the piece is kind of about cyclicity and beginnings and endings going together. This ending could also be the beginning for you. So check out the performance. Thank you to everybody who checked it out, and thank you to everybody who asked questions and stuff. And wash your hands lots. Take care of your community, and hopefully hopefully we can all learn a lot during this time about teleconferencing, and that we won't have to use in the near future when we're allowed back outside. Near future, far future, who knows? Thanks again. All right, ciao. Thanks again. All right, ciao. Oh, okay. This is the place. This is the part where actually some friends, some folks are telling me on the some folks are telling me on the chat that this is actually where you plug your stream and you encourage people to subscribe and tip and such things. The gallery paid me for this performance already, so you don't need to do any of the in-app purchases if you have money that you feel like contributing or would have otherwise contributed to this performance. Throw it at a mutual aid fund in your own community, or to one of the food banks or homeless shelters, or anything to support other folks in your community. And then if you liked it and you're curious to see if I do another such thing, you can subscribe or follow my stream, and you can like review it, and I guess that goes into my my rankings, and then I can compete with all those other Twitchers like and YouTubers like PewDiePie and such things. All right, thank you.